Hi, I'm Malcolm Stern, and in conjunction with my friends John and Sandra Wilson from Online Events, we're creating a series of podcasts called Slay Your Dragons with Compassion. My book of the same name was conceived and inspired by the suicide of my daughter Melissa and the journey that took me on and the internal resources that I found. All of my guests will have a story to tell around overcoming and ultimately thriving through adversity. Special thanks to the band Stairway, Jim McCarty and Louis Chinamo, for the use of theme music from their album Medicine Dance, and my engineer Owen Santiago. I hope you enjoy this series, and thanks for listening. Welcome to my podcast, Slay Your Dragons with Compassion, which I'm doing in conjunction with my friends at Online Events. And today I'm interviewing a lovely woman who lives down the road from me. So she's with me in the frame, you'll see. And Karen and I have been friends for a few years, but she has a wonderful story to tell, a few wonderful stories to tell. So we're going to talk about her journey through managing adversity. And that's really what this is about. The whole podcast is really about what we learn from adversity, what we're being educated in, and how we function with that. So, Karen, big welcome to you. Very lovely to see you. And we are looking today at a number of things. I think when I first met you, I met you at a friend's birthday lunch, and you'd had an extraordinary experience. And let's start with that, because that's a really powerful thing to explore. And I remember I was captivated over lunch that you'd had a sort of an not an extraterrestrial, but more a sort of like you'd had an experience of going beyond your physical body and finding something in yourself. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. Yes, that happened in 2012. It's a while ago. I'd had a shock. I was upset in a relationship that I was in at the time. Something had happened, and I was feeling very low and angry as well. And something happened when I went to bed that night. Is that I'd been reading a little bit. I'd been reading about somebody's experience, funnily enough, with cancer, and how they had a turnaround in the way they saw it. And this, while I was reading this dialogue between this particular person who was ill and the person who was mentoring them, a sort of stillness came into me. It's hard to describe what that is, but it wasn't just inside me, it was all around me. And everything that I'd perhaps been trying to do in the past, like we do, when we hear people talk about this sort of thing, happened in an instant without me attempting anything. And that was that there was suddenly this deep kind of inner stillness and an utter peace that took away all my feelings about everything. It was almost as if I existed in this stillness. It was like a real, I almost felt like I wasn't transported anywhere else. I was right there in my bed, but I felt this peace, and all the upset feelings just went away. And I didn't really know what had happened, and I could have got quite frightened actually, because it was so expansive. But I just sat with it, and I went that night. I couldn't sleep really. I wasn't aware of sleeping, but there was what I could only describe like a void, like a dazzling kind of darkness that came upon me, and I was in that void. I was just in it, and I don't know how long it went on for. I know that I felt completely safe and totally well. I wasn't frightened anymore. But the me that I knew, and the personality that I was aware of, and the self that I was identified with had disappeared completely.
So in fact, you effectively transcended your ego for a short period. It wasn't that short a period of time. It was a couple of weeks.
It was a couple of weeks, but it wasn't even that I transcended it, though it happened.
It's exactly. You were no longer in that place. But I know people have often used drugs, or they've used other things which have sort of taken them into altered states of consciousness.
Yes.
But you found an altered state of consciousness,
Yes.
and that probably will lead us into the two very large things that you've been dealing with.
Yes.
You mentioned the word cancer, and we'll talk about that in a little
Yeah.
while
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you have been given a terminal diagnosis, and
Yes.
I'm very grateful that we're able to talk about that
Yes.
here on this in this program.
Yes, absolutely.
But actually, you've dealt with something enormous as well, which was your daughter, and what happened to her in
Mm.
her when she was young.
Yes. Do you want me to
Please,
talk
yes.
about that? Well, my daughter, whose name I won't necessarily mention her name, I'll just say I have a younger daughter who is, as I speak, still suffering really a lot of the time. Um, she 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 had a stroke when she was 9 years old. It was an accident in the gym. Prior to that, she was a perfectly healthy child. She hit her head. No one knew she even had an injury, but it turned out that the artery leading to the brain had been injured and a blood clot had formed over the next few weeks, and she collapsed at school. And from that time onwards, she had a major. She had to be rushed to Great Ormond Street. Um, what I can say is that although she she had she came out of that with, she had to learn to speak again, walk again. Her right side never really fully recovered. She went through so much, and it changed her personality in a way. It changed her perception of who she was. And so this meant that even though she'd have better times where she was okay and could get on with things, by the time she was 20, she started having these mega breakdowns. I mean, really bad mental health breakdowns where she was in and out of hospital. She's been sectioned several times. She's attempted her own life several times. She's now in her mid-30s and she's still struggling with this. And in fact, it hasn't really got better. So that was my major grief as a mother. We were we are close. I'm close to both my daughters, and the whole family suffered. But I was the one really that was there when she was little and growing up, always attempting to make a difference, to change this, to make it better for her. That's trying to find a way, and we never could. I couldn't rescue her from this, and that's still hard for me. It's still hard for me. It's the hardest thing for me to talk about really and feel when I do feel it, because yes, now she's a woman, she has to find her way. I don't know if she's going to make it, you know what that is because of
I
your
do,
daughter.
yes.
And we carry this with us, and luckily I have a very loving family. I have good people around me. I am supported. I'm not on my own, thank God. And I just would love the same for her, because it's very difficult for her to find or be in the relationships she could have been in had she had a more normal life. So yeah, that's that. Um, and I still carry that with me. I mean, that hasn't been resolved really. Maybe I'm finding a little bit more distance, and that sort of leads me into what's happened recently.
Well, I think what's happened recently is I was sort of so struck with how you're managing what's happened recently. So I thought it'd be very useful to look at this in this environment without being sort of almost like sort of intrusive. But I know that you're very open and that you're very open to talking about with honesty
Yeah,
and integrity what's happening for you.
yeah, absolutely. I have no problems talking about it whatsoever.
So you were given a terminal diagnosis.
Yes. Have you got a tissue there?
I have, yes.
The terminal diagnosis came my way rather abruptly. I mean, I knew already that I had had a lump in my breast for a while, and I chose to treat it in alternative ways. I didn't go to doctors. I was feeling perfectly well otherwise. And my daughter had been a bit worried about that. And when my breast, it was in the breast, when it erupted a bit, which it can, when there's a lump in there, she then said to me, Mum, I think, I want to go to the doctors with you. You have to show that to a doctor. And I gave in to that. I said, okay, and I went. And anyway, yes, the doctor took one look at it and said terminal cancer, which which was a heavy one because it wasn't the most diplomatic. And if the lady ever watches this, I don't hold a grudge against her because she didn't mean it, just came out of her mouth like that. And of course, that set me off. This wasn't that long ago. It was only about, I don't know, how long ago was it? 3 months, 2 months,
Yeah, I
3 months maybe.
yes.
And it had spread basically. I mean, they then did scans on me and they saw that it had spread to different parts of the body. They were saying things like, well, we can give you this and this and this to prolong your life, but it will shorten your life and all that kind of thing. And what actually happened, even in the doctor's surgery, it started again. I got this. This time it was a different sort of presence. I felt a great stillness again come over me, and I also felt what I can only describe as my spirit. I wouldn't even say it was soul. I would say it's spirit. It was so strongly there. It was like that, and because all my life I've known that I'm not just this body, it wasn't as hard for me as maybe for some people who are very identified with their physical vehicle. And I already was able to know, well, okay, I could accept it. If this was my time, it was my time. And I also understood something about the breast cancer on that side of the body because I know a little bit about New German medicine, if anyone's heard about that. It's got some interesting ideas about where illness comes from. And I actually met the guy who here in Totnes who knows about it. And I said to him, he said to me, which breast? And I said, it's the left breast, and I'm a right-handed woman. And their diagnosis for that is grief for your child. And so, of course, that made so much sense, quite apart from all the other stuff they were going on about estrogen-based whatever cancers. That I felt that was the true cause of it. Having had nowhere to really go or really recover from the grief that I've had with Catherine, and it's just been there for so many years, and obviously the body takes its toll on that, and the body is a living entity in a way, having reactions to things, and but the spirit self is not touched by that, and it's the true being. It's the truth of who we are. And I think I was able to let go in that moment and say, okay, so be it, whatever will be, will be. But that's not giving up, it's just accepting it. And the worst thing for me, again, is dealing with the feelings of my family, especially my daughters. They've been wonderful. I mean, especially Anna, she lives here in Totnes, and she was able to, she's come around. I mean, she was very, very upset to begin with, but she's come around, and she's been really very, very supportive as well. So, and yes, that presence hasn't left me. It's still very much with me. I feel incredibly peaceful.
Mm. And of course, in every major spiritual tradition, religious tradition, there is the still small voice within. And it feels like that voice has become enlarged. It got enlarged some years ago. It's had to be enlarged to deal with the pain around your daughter. And it's become enlarged again so that you're finding some strength from a place where people often don't find strength, or often may find strength at the end of their days.
Yeah.
But it feels like something is being born in you as something is dying in you as well.
That's right. Yes, that's absolutely right. And there's a feeling at the moment of this being. I know it sounds very strange, but it's a teacher. The teacher, there's a blessing in it somewhere, and that's and I welcome that. I don't feel like I'm fighting a monster here. Does that make any sense?
It makes a lot of sense. When you talk about the teacher, I can think about my daughter's suicide, which my book, So Your Dragon with Compassion, was about. And obviously when that happens, one is devastated. I was devastated. Absolutely. And smashed up.
Absolutely.
By it. But bit by bit, there were hidden sides to it that I hadn't expected or even wanted or even known were there. But I became a bigger person. as a result of it. And what I'm seeing is that your experiences have led you to your own growth process. I mean,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, we are temporal beings
Yes.
in this body,
Yes.
which will, as the Buddhists say, it will inevitably age, decay, and die.
Mm.
And you're having to face that at an earlier stage in your life than many people.
Mm.
But you are facing it, and you are facing it with I think you're facing it full on. I mean, obviously it's early days,
Mm.
but you've had a chance to get over some of the shock of the
Mm.
diagnosis, and now you're dealing with what does this say to you? What how do you want to spend the rest of your life?
Well, it's a funny thing, but I can't even think about the rest of my life in that way. It's almost like I'm here today. I'm very much in the present moment. And I'm also realizing I mean, I don't know how far it will go, but I'm realizing that my symptoms are receding. I'm not actually getting worse. If anything, there are improvements. And it's as if the body is responding to the spirit, if you see what I mean, to the being that I truly am. And at the moment, at least, it's not showing any signs of really collapsing. And so, but if it did, I would take I would take that path with the same peace. Whatever will be, will be. That's my, that's how I feel. And whilst I'm here, I live every day with tremendous presence. I'm there, with whoever I'm with, and when I'm eating my meal and I'm enjoying my food again, because one of the things about cancer is that you lose tons of weight, you feel sick as a dog, and you feel nauseous and you can't eat anything. And when that started shifting and I got hungry again, and people have helped me with this, by cooking great food, and I actually started to the life started to come back into me, and lots of little things. I can walk further than I could, and things like that. I've got a bit more energy. So there are some improvements. I don't know how long they'll last, or if I don't know what it will mean, but it, there's nothing about anything that's happened to me that I can reject. I accept it. It's like I feel, okay, there's a bigger purpose behind everything that happens to us. And I think unless, I can't fight any of it anymore. I mean, I have fought things in my life. I have ranted and raged against what's happened to Catherine. And I have to accept that one too. And she, funnily enough, has withdrawn quite a bit of her energy from me, not because she doesn't care or love me, but because she knows I need that space. Bless her heart.
Well, I remember being very touched when I spoke to you about her, and she said to you, "Mum, I think I'm going to have to grow up now."
I just have to grow up now.
And I just thought that was so moving that actually, everything has an impact on the people around us as
Yeah,
well. And it's no wonder that you've had an extraordinary training in some ways with Catherine.
I have.
That actually you've been educated, as I've been educated by Melissa's death.
Mm-hmm.
You've been educated by your daughter's terrible injuries
Mm.
and what it's done to her as well.
Mm.
This very beautiful sort of, was it 9 or
9 years. She just had her ninth
so
birthday.
she was 9 years old, and suddenly the whole world has changed in one moment. The whole world has changed,
Mm-hmm.
and in some ways, you going to the doctor that and with your other daughter Anna,
Yeah,
and in that one moment where the doctor said terminal, your whole world
it
changes,
is.
and then we have to learn to adapt to our circumstances,
Mm.
and not to go, oh my God, this is terrible things that are happening to us. We are being educated in this life,
Mm-hmm.
clearly.
Mm-hmm.
And I've watched the gracefulness with which your education is taking place, has taken place, and I'm pretty sure will take place
Mm-hmm.
as this goes to wherever it goes
Goes
to
to.
next. So I think that there's something about our state of mind that is so important.
Mm.
And I was talking to a friend earlier on the phone, and she was saying the difficulty she was having with her ex-husband, and I said, and I wasn't being trite or sort of or patronizing, and I said, what an extraordinary education you have. You're having to learn to handle the adversity. And what I can see is that you're becoming more and more skilled. And that's what I can see with you is that you're learning to handle adversity in your life and becoming more and more skilled. And obviously that's happened within your background as well, because I know that you grew up in the shadow shortly after Nazi Germany as well. And tell us a little bit about your mother in that environment.
Well, first of all, my mother was German, and grew up in Nazi Germany, and she was a very, very, she from the age of, I think, what was it, 12 to 16, those were the war years for her. So she was very much in pubescence, and in her early teenage years, she picked up on everything. Her mother was widowed and had 3 children to get through that war. Along with a lot of others that were sent under from the Eastern part bloc. They sent kids into the West, and I think at one point she had 7 children with her. That was and my mother was a very sensitive child. She picked up on how all the teachers changed at school, and the ones that were were real Nazis. They'd been almost like chosen to be, and they would ask the children what kind of conversations they were having at home. They were trying to pick out who was not in favor of the Hitler, basically, and all that was. It was a real tyranny. And so Mum was very, very aware of who she could speak to, who she couldn't, because they were very anti-Nazi in her family. Her mum was Christian, a good Christian. I mean, it only took the proper Christians to actually stand up and not go along with this. And I think at one point, because she refused to, everyone had to go into the Hitler something or other, whether it was for kids, for women, and my grandmother refused, and so they took all her money away from her. And it was funnily enough, an SS officer who lived up the road who said, "My God, now they're starting on the widows and orphans," and he actually got the money back for her. He was disgusted. He knew her, and he was very angry that had happened to her. And he had a position of power, so he could help. And so not all the SS people were terrible, they just got caught up in a system, like we see all the time. I mean, that's what happens. And so my upbringing, my mum then came to the UK, met my dad, and I was born. But I grew up with an understanding. I was always in Germany. My mum took us there a lot. And, I speak German. When I was little, my parents lived in Vienna. And I was aware from an early age what tyranny looks like because of what I'd grown up with. And both my parents thought for themselves. They didn't just kowtow to authority. So I was lucky. I had that quite strong. I had quite strong parents.
It's interesting, because they say the Bible says that the sins of the parents are visited on the children generation after generation. What it doesn't say, I think, is actually the virtues of the parents are visited upon the children. And so I feel like that powerful streak in you has passed down through your maternal line.
Yes, it has.
And you are, undoubtedly a strong woman.
Yes. Yes, and I think this misery about what you just said about what it says in the Bible, what it says is always about sin. What we don't focus on is our light and our goodness. And all religions have been responsible for hammering, whatever population they're part of, and there's just so much I can't go with. I'm not of any one particular religion, but I am I'm aware of very deeply spiritually awake. If I can say that, that's
You can say that,
yeah.
yes.
I'm not interested in any kind of. I'm not. I mean, I wouldn't. It's up to people where they go and what they believe and stuff. But for me, the most important thing is for people to recognize that whatever they see as God or divine source, it's there. It's within us. It's right here, and I know that. And it's not just me. It's everyone. And I say to people all the time when they're struggling or they're going through something, just come back to divine inner essence. It is already God. It's right there, and we are actually, yeah, we're angelic humans.
I guess that's why the practice of meditation is so important, that it actually stills you enough to allow you to get hold of that voice. But other things will also still us in that way as well. I know Eckhart Tolle
I've always been
was
crap at
stilled.
meditation. I'm
Yes.
terrible at it. I've tried, and I think it's great for some people, but it will come upon me sometimes just by itself. It's almost like and sometimes when I'm walking, it's like a meditation because I'm out in nature and I like being on my own. I like having company as well. Like when we go for walks, but I do like to be by myself. And my dad was the same. He'd go off on long walks by himself. So I think we have to find that within ourselves to truly feel less attached to the seeming outside authority of any kind telling us what's right about us and what's what, and looking to it. And I think humanity has been enslaved in that way through always authority.
Yeah.
And we're now growing up. We have to.
Yes.
We've got to grow up because we're in a crisis situation.
Yes.
I mean, we're not going to go all into that, but I do feel that this is a wonderful opportunity for humanity to turn around and think, you know, I've actually got it within me. I've got this within me. I've got goodness within me because we've been hammered. You're a miserable sinner and you're no good and you've got to atone and and it doesn't matter which religion you look at, they're all full of that stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, and of course there's always the pearls, there's always the good stuff in there as well. You just have to be able to you need to discern it.
Yes.
We need to discern it.
No, I get it.
No.
It's funny, and I was watching a program on Netflix the other day about people who are dying, and it was the Zen Cancer Hospice they were looking at in San Francisco.
Oh, wow.
And the main doctor there had lost both his legs and one arm.
Wow.
In a terrible accident he'd had at 19 years old. And his compassion, I watched him. I think there were about half a dozen people that were part of the program, all of whom died by the end of the program. But his compassion was extraordinary. And I thought, he's going to be he's chosen the path of doctoring, but he's going to be such a great doctor because he's suffered so much. And he said he no longer sees himself as not whole, even though his legs and one hand have gone. And it was genuine. And I think we need more wounded healers who come through it and help others. And I know that that's true for you. And I know, if I'm able to say so, it's true for me as well. And I think, Melissa's death was such an educator for me. God help her. I wish she was, I wish she was still here.
Well, she's somewhere.
Yes.
Well, I'm ready. She is here. That's the thing.
Yes.
I know that she's here because it's like I suggest we sort of shift, don't we, into another state. But we're really we always are. And I think that, her role in this was obviously huge.
Yes.
To help you.
Well, I think that's true. And in fact, when I wrote my book, this sounds weird as well, which was about Melissa's death, but also the lessons I learned from that. I felt like she was with me the whole time I was writing it. So whereas a book normally takes me 4 years to write, this took me 7 months to write because I felt like I was steered by her and also by the wonderful Ben Crave who helped me write it as well. But yeah, so we can see adversity in one way as my God, we're being punished by some horrible God, or we can see adversity as something that actually forces us to grow. It squeezes us tight like a diamond. So a piece of coal becomes a diamond.
Yes, that's right. That's a very good analogy. Yeah, I think so, because what I see is diamond. I see the light in and I love anything that reflects light anyway. And I think that once we fully appreciate how magnificent we actually are. Yes. And I really feel that. And when I meet people, even people who are very downtrodden, who've got problems, when I walked around those first days after I got that diagnosis, I felt a massive gratitude for my life. I couldn't feel anything else. And I was in this state of gratitude, and also I felt this kinship with whoever was walking past me in the street. I couldn't feel the separation so much anymore.
Yes.
And all I could feel was love. I felt love, and I knew I was in a state of grace, and I was so grateful for that.
Yes.
And it was amazing how many people beamed at me, smiled when I was walking along. They didn't know me from Adam, but they were picking it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we are each other, and ultimately that's what we're here to learn. I think we are here to learn in all our different ways the truth of who we are, which is one heart, one essence in the divine, or whatever you want to call it.
Well, you've obviously conjured up a set of circumstances that's going to deepen and quicken your process as well.
Yes,
So that's lovely.
That's right. Yeah, nothing's an accident. That's another thing, you know, or things appear. I mean, all the horrible things that happened to Catherine, I still don't understand why, but there will be a reason, and nothing is without its meaning or without its purpose. And I have to trust that she too has her guides. She has her, you know, and that all ultimately will be well, you know. That's the thing.
Yes. It's sometimes hard to remember that as well when we do go through enormous adversity and
Oh, very,
change.
very difficult.
But I can see that you're actually going to ride this circumstance with grace and with dignity as well. And I have no doubt about that. And of course, you're not in the sort of like the full flush of it at this stage.
No, I'm not.
But you're preparing yourself for the full flush of it when it arrives. So we're coming towards the end of the podcast, and I'm just the question I always ask my interviewees is what's the dragon you've had to slay in order to be who you are? And when I say that, I'm talking about what's the hurdle you've had to overcome? What's the difficulty you've had to surmount in order to fully be you?
Well, I wouldn't say there's one that I could mention in my life. I would say that every time there was adversity, whether it was I was hurt in a relationship or things that happened with Catherine, or I can think of other examples, there's always a reason, there's always a good purpose for everything. If we allow ourselves to get still and see what it is, we're not victims. And it might, and that's all right. I mean, it's all right for me to say that.
I'm not a victim.
I'm not a victim.
And
I mean, there are people who are in situations where they're victimized. There's no doubt about it. I'm not saying that, you know, being holier than thou about that. I fully understand that. But ultimately, everything will have it'll have the bigger picture, and we won't see it necessarily straight away.
We won't even necessarily see it in our lifetime.
No, we might not even see it in our lifetime. And sometimes there are collective disasters that happen to a lot of people. And who knows, you know, what understanding they come to it, either in this dimension or in others. You know, one thing's for sure, we don't die, and we are immortal beings, and everything that that we experience has some value and some meaning somewhere, you know. I do feel that, and I think we're bloody amazing. I think we're amazing to even be here. I think human beings are something else.
Yes, I did a podcast with Tim Freak, the philosopher, recently. And he said, you know, we were pieces of gas, and you know, we've somehow become human beings.
Yes,
you know,
yes, it knows what we were.
Yes.
I mean, yes, I mean, it's an incredible thing.
It is. It's an incredible life with all of its difficulties.
Yes,
it's an incredible life.
It's an incredible life.
Yeah,
it is. It really is. Yeah.
So thank you very much indeed. It's really lovely to see you, Karen, and really appreciate you being as open as you were and as philosophical as you are. Because I often say to people, I don't want philosophy on this, but actually, when philosophy is born of experience, it's a different ballgame.
Yes, it is. Yeah. It is a different.
So thank you so much.
It's not a theory.
It's not just a theory.
No.
You're living what you're talking. Yes. And your mother lived what you're talking.
She did. Yes, she did. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you so much for being with us.
Welcome.
Cheers, then. Okay.